Welcome to Communion, our latest edition of our podcast. I'm sitting in a house that we've just finished for a client, a very unusual house, a 1970s, well 1969 it was built by a renowned builder in Hereford at the time. A very much one-off house overlooking the river, and when we met the client, we were looking at an extension to provide actually kind of interesting spaces, a gym, a better garage, a new principal bedroom, an ensuite, and balcony. And as we walked through the project, through the different stages that we look to work with all of our clients, it's like every project, it is a journey, and it's always great to get to the point where you can sit around a table and have a chat about the project. I mean, for us, that's such an important part of what Communion is, sitting around a table celebrating a project once it's been completed. I asked our client, as always, to just review, because what we find with this podcast is, a lot of people talk about the design aspect of architecture, but what we like to talk about is the process. So the initial thoughts, how, why people want to buy certain houses, then, why there is always an itch and we could do something. And then the process of working with architects and designers in order to bring forward a project. And then the bigger project that kicks off after that, of working with contractors and builders and glaziers and decorators on site, and going through that whole process and how we're involved in that, in order to get us to the point of completion where we are sitting and enjoying the new life, the transformation of the space and the transformation of the lives that really is our vision at Communion. So, whatever you're doing, we welcome you to this next podcast where I talk to Russell about his new house, the LA House of Herefordshire. Thanks very much. So, Russell, thanks very much for sitting in your completed project, looking really, really good. I just thought it would be interesting for us to sort of go back in time a little bit and talk about the process we've been on, the journey we've been on. I know this house, you bought this house. Tell us a little bit about the house and what interested you in the house in the first instance.
Sure. So I was looking for a house in Hereford for quite a long time. I've lived in Georgian houses, Edwardian houses. I actually quite like new modern houses. I don't really want to live on a kind of new modern estate. There are very few plots around nowadays. So this house came up about 3 or so years ago, and obviously it's in a fantastic position with the most incredible views, river frontage, river mooring, which you're not going to get pretty much anywhere else. There's only a handful of houses in Hereford like this. The house itself was built in 1969 by a renowned local builder, and I think built, it's fair to say, exceptionally well, certainly according to the structural survey I had done on the house. But what passed for a fantastic house in 1969 is different to what passes for a fantastic house in 2020, 2021. So, things like an home office, in our case, a gym, utility room, more bathrooms, another bedroom. It's just kind of a natural evolution of how houses have grown over time. And as I say, I like the idea of new, modern, clean. The house itself was structurally very good, but just needed updating and extending, which is where we got to, having lived here for probably a year and a half or so before we made the decision to sort of talk to you to look at what we could do to extend it and to improve it.
No, it's great. No, all that is true. I mean, it is an interesting house. Fantastic. I mean, really fantastic location. Feels a bit like, I've never been, but it's like an LA house. I know that you're more familiar.
I've been, many times. Yeah, so that's what I kind of designed it on or modelled it on. Really.
Yeah. No, it's great. So, in terms of, there was, the works that we did. It was really focused around improved garage, gym, and principal bedroom.
Yeah.
You had quite strong ideas about that. So, what made you go from just having ideas to talking to an architect?
There were a few issues in terms of how the kind of an extension. It was a flat roof, single garage on the side of a kind of 4-bedroom house, detached house, and it wasn't straightforward with a retaining wall that kind of adjoins the next door's property. Although they're decent sized properties, decent sized plots, it was still abutting a wall that adjoined next door's property. And there was some sort of consternation about how it was built onto that wall or next to the wall, and it wasn't a straightforward kind of decision as to how it was built. And then also upstairs, I think over time bathrooms probably had been kind of added on to the property, and there were a couple of kind of balconies which weren't ideal, and there was a lot more kind of structural design work needed than just say add this on here and kind of improve this. So that was really when, and also having done houses up in the past, kind of myself, or as being in charge of a project, I kind of wanted a project done properly, because I anticipated being away in London at work most of the time the project was going on. Obviously with COVID-19 that didn't transpire to be the case, but we can go back to that, I'm sure.
No, that's great. And I remember, I came round and we had a chat as part of our initial consultation, and we threw around some ideas. Was that a helpful process? Anything, came up with the idea of, I think we came up with the idea of adding another bay window and balcony. I think that's what we sort of said there.
Yeah, it was kind of, yes, it was, because the original house kind of finished at a certain point, so there's a slightly larger terrace, but given that there are terraces on the way down towards the river, and that the terrace was big enough in any case, it kind of, the initial conversation to extend or to build a conservatory really on the end of the living room, and then extend what was an old conservatory into a much larger gym. Initially, the thought process was, well, that's just going to sort of take away from the terrace, but actually, as it turns out, the terrace was big enough and it kind of worked. And when you see the plans drawn out, it actually makes much more sense. So it kind of changed the thinking in terms of, and actually, in truth, what's happened is the inside living areas have become bigger and the outside terrace slightly smaller. But realistically, as beautiful as the outlook is at the back, 10 months a year you live inside the house, not outside the house. So it's actually worked out very well in that respect.
That's good. And we go from that initial conversations, and then there is like the survey. You make space for our survey team to come around. They draw the building, and then we come and have a chat in terms of turning the ideas we've talked about into drawings. That's often quite an interesting time where you see ideas sort of represented for the first time. Any kind of standout thoughts about that, and how it that process and the conversations and the way you go from ideas to something, okay, well, this is a plan now.
Yeah, kind of, because initially you think about extending and improving, but when you say improving, you kind of think more about bathrooms, kitchens and things like that, furniture and decor. But actually, what the drawings did initially is maybe realise it actually would then look like a much newer house.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you remember, we had the outside was part stone and part clad in kind of 1960s kind of bobbly stuff. Rough cast, yeah. And it didn't look very clever, but really it was quite a big job to remove that and replace it, and we didn't intend to do it. But when you put modern windows and glass extensions on the back of something, it would look ridiculous with this kind of 50-year-old cladding, that rough cast cladding. So, you realise actually straight away looking at the drawings that actually it will end up being a very modern looking house, which is what I wanted in the first place.
Oh, okay, well, that's interesting. No, so it's sort of I can see what you're saying, that you start out with like the functional requirements. I need a gym, I need this, I need that. But then when you first saw the drawings, which is good actually, that they convey that actually what you see is a kind of vision for the scheme and the appearance and the aesthetic.
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
good.
Yeah, because really you assume that what you can do is knock. I looked at a couple of other houses with nice views in different roads around here that you could have knocked down because they weren't particularly good houses, sort of 70s houses, and built a brand new one. And that kind of here, this house was too good and too big to kind of knock down. It wasn't bad enough to knock down and start again, and it would have been too expensive. So actually, the thought process of improving it, but to a point where it looks now like a new house to most people's eye, was quite interesting. Yeah, because it wasn't, as I didn't anticipate having essentially what is really a new house, but that's what we've ended up with.
Got you. Yeah. No, you've gone from doing an extension in order to provide some space, to actually, where we're sitting here now, actually, for all intents and purposes, a completely new house, new living experience, and everything.
Yeah.
That's great. Obviously there was a planning consent involved and everything like that. There was a little bit of discussion, I remember, with neighbours in terms of balconies are always a kind of interesting point, but I think mostly that passed off quite smoothly as far as I can remember. Anything that, from your point of view, or concerns? Or
No, I mean, the neighbours on the one side are old family friends, and they were delightful. On the other side, they had more concerns, which is ironic because they extended their house, sort of incredibly over the years, to the point that it's actually probably twice the size of this one. So no, but in the end, it was all fairly straightforward, really. I think it was just again around the sort of partitioning wall between the two driveways and that sort of thing.
That was it was always contentious, that item, wasn't it?
It wasn't really significant.
No.
And you're in town, literally, half a mile from town. So albeit with the incredible view in the river, and it feels like you're in the country at the back of the house. You're never going to be far away from another house because it is essentially a townhouse. So, it's not really overlooked. You could argue that one or two windows from one of the houses next door overlooked a little bit, but then I overlook the next door the other way because we're kind of coming down a hill. So that's inevitably going to be the case, whichever way. But no, it all worked out pretty well in the end.
And there's often the kind of change in mindset when you're given a piece of paper saying you got planning consent, from can I do this project to oh my word, now we've got to go and do that project, which kicks us into the next stage. Do you remember that, or for you was it always a kind of done deal in terms of we're just doing the project and the planning was just a step on the way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, the decision was made a long time before that. Well, really, the decisions were made when I bought the house. It was just that I didn't do it immediately because I wasn't quite sure what we wanted to do, and timing with work and everything else wasn't quite right. But the planning. I mean, and looking around at the other houses, sort of further up the hill, the next couple of houses have had a lot of extension and improvement over the years. So it was very unlikely that this wouldn't have been approved. I didn't know much about planning, but it would have seemed extremely unfair if they would have extended theirs, extraneously, and I kind of haven't been able to. So I didn't think that was much of a decision, really. It was made already.
That's great. So, from our point of view, then we go from the initial ideas and the scheme design then into quite a detailed phase where we're looking at, how we have to get engineers involved and, think about the constructions and everything. And a lot of it is kind of, our side. But we try and, there's two important things. One's we're talking about sort of details, which help, I think, people think about how they're going to live in it, so like placements of electrical sockets, but also with yourselves, we spent quite a lot of time designing bedroom furniture and shelves and things like that. Any thoughts about like the detailed design process, in terms of anything you remember or anything that you found helpful, or anything you'd say, for someone else commissioning that, beware of this, or I don't know?
No, I mean, one thing I think is clear, it's easier designing from scratch. So where there was a brand new bedroom and bathroom and dressing room on top of the original garage, or the new garage as it is now, it's so much easier to fit that out than it is to kind of work with existing bedrooms and change them. So all we ended up doing really with those is remove a few old cupboards and actually paint them the same colour as the new stuff. But the new stuff, as you recommended, was done by a local firm, which I quite like. Sort of way Hereford works is you use local people, and it's somebody I knew from old. So, and they did a fantastic job. And it was, but I would say that's all really. I knew what I wanted. I like everything clean. The beauty of having OCD is you can just get everything out of the way and make it all clean and tidy. But it's so much easier to start from scratch. I can see how it's easier to build a new house and renovate an old house. But it's and that worked out very well. I mean, the work was fantastic actually, and it looks great. It looks exactly as we kind of envisaged it, which is nice.
That's great. And we did we did a little bit of a 3D model for the bathroom and everything, particularly to try and give, it's difficult when you're designing pieces of furniture to make them feel like what they were. I think that was helpful, or
incredibly, yeah. It's kind of it's kind of what I know it sounds awful, but I've spent a lot of time in hotels over the years, and I kind of I certain hotels I've been in I've really liked that are clean and modern, and I kind of designed it on that. As somebody came around the other day, I tried to explain that I designed it on some of the best hotels I'd ever stayed in, and he said, yeah, but it's like a really nice hotel. I said, well, I wasn't going to design it on a really bad one. So, which was sort of slightly confusing, but yeah. So it was kind of, I can name that. I know the hotels that kind of designed it, and the drawings helped to sort of put that into perspective, really.
Brilliant. And then there's always the moving on to site. So the detailed design work allowed us to discuss and agree the cost with Richard, who was our builder, who you knew that you wanted to work with. I know there's always a kind of like a second level of commitment when the costs come through and there's a decision to, we're going to take it onto site. Tell us a bit about your thoughts about doing that. There's probably a lot going on in your mind when you're...
Yeah, I mean, I started, the first conversation I ever had about the house once I'd bought it was with my best friend who's an estate agent who bought the house through. And I said, how much would it cost to, literally stick a bedroom and bathroom on top of the garage? And he told me, and I thought, yeah, okay. And then I think we've ended up spending 4 times as much as that. So, it was, the money was, the financial conversation in my head had already been committed. And I kind of, just in life in general, you kind of always assume that everything's going to cost you twice as much as you think, even if you've got a detailed plan, because I just kind of had it in my head that there were other things we might end up doing. Maybe not straight away, but maybe later. And then once you get into it, you realise that certainly you don't want to live in a building site again. So you kind of, just while it's there, just, bite the bullet and get it all done. So, no, the conversation, I mean, I kind of knew, it's not an investment, it's a house, but I kind of knew roughly what it would ultimately cost to do all the things that I ever wanted to do. We just did them much quicker than I assumed.
Okay, yeah.
So it was always, the conversation had already been had, and it was compartmentalised, and you take it from there, really.
That's good. So then there's always the fun of moving on to site.
Yeah.
So the first casualty of battle is the plan, isn't it? Your plan was not to be around too much. We obviously, there's always a conversation that we have about, are people going to stay in their house? Are people going to move out? With this, it was, in the first instance, very much a bolt-on to what we've got. So very feasible to live in-house. And you were happy to do that because you were planning not to be here for an awful lot, but that obviously didn't happen. Yeah. So any thoughts about, and for people who are thinking the same thing, thoughts about working on site with builders?
Yeah, the plan, as you said, I'd work in London most of the time, so I've got a house in London, so I wasn't, I would have intended to be here maybe on a Friday and not for the rest of the week. My adult children who occasionally live, most likely one lives with me full time, the others a lot of the time would have all been at work or college, and then kind of, COVID happened, so obviously we ended up all pretty much the whole of last year all being here. They were mainly furloughed. I was banned from going into my office in London. We all had to work from home. So, it was interesting. It was, I wouldn't recommend it, as I say, if you have any level of OCD. And it was just working with builders that actually working with builders that are pretty straightforward and honest, because, if you're told in advance there's going to be a huge mess and they're taking walls down in your sitting room and it's all going to be covered in plastic, don't go in there, is much easier than going there and finding out it's a huge mess. And also, so I guess it was kind of, you just get in your head that you understand why you're doing it and you understand it's going to take time, which in the first instance was 9 months. I think in any case it would have probably taken us 10 or 11 because we did do more than the original plan. As it turned out, I think it was 18, which, but you're working towards a goal, and if as long as you get kind of your head around that, it's not, it would be much easier to move out. But having said that, as I said before, there are things I saw as it was going on that I wanted to improve or change that I wouldn't have done had I not been here or had I moved out. So it was, I don't think there's any right thing to do. And although we were mainly adding things onto the house, there was actually an incredible amount of work inside the house. So although there was always a couple of bedrooms, kitchen and stuff pretty much usable, it was still covered in dust. So, and that's just inevitably part of the of the whole project. So.
And I think part of you being around was instrumental in actually you adding and considering doing additional works, especially to the inside of the house. So, the original plan was, yes, there was always some works because obviously we've got the extension to the sitting room and the extension proper and changing the windows and doors. So quite a lot of work. Yeah. But there was no real anticipation of redecorating or reimagining other parts of the house, which, I think that you were like, I think whilst we're here, we need to do this.
Well, I think as with a lot of houses from the 60s and 70s, they were kind of hacienda style arches in 2 or 3 places in the main living areas, and you find it when you move in, they look horrendous. I mean, apparently they were quite popular then. They're quite fun when you're on holiday, but not any other time. And you kind of, you kind of get used to them when you live with them for a while, and you kind of don't notice them. And then suddenly, when somebody puts, very large, kind of almost industrial scale, ultra modern windows and doors into the back of the property next to the arches, it's pretty evident within a few minutes that you couldn't live with them. So I think. Yeah, inevitably, I mean, that work would have had to been done. It kind of worked out well that we could incorporate it, because I would have looked at it after and then said, no, we've got to do this. And actually, it doesn't just involve removing an arch. Unfortunately, as you know, it generally involves putting a new steel in because it's holding one of the bedrooms up. So it was quite technical and complicated work, and I'm kind of very glad in a way that I was here to do it, because I wouldn't have been happy. With basically you've got a 50-year-old interior on a brand new exterior of a house, and that's never really going to work long term. I mean, some things were incredible, like the kitchen, which was apparently very good quality, but kind of shaker style, more country cottage rather than new modern house. And I had an incredible painter who just said, yeah, but if I just paint that gloss white and change the knobs to like chrome, it'll look fantastic. So I went away to London for 2 days, came back, and it was like a new kitchen, literally. So that was incredible, because that literally cost almost nothing. But I was ready to rip a 5-year-old quite expensive kitchen out and put a new one in, because it kind of didn't work, and literally just painting it. But then other things, as I say, in the sitting room here, we literally had to remove walls and put steels in which weren't part of the original plan, which took a long time, caused a lot of mess, and would have cost a fortune, but was definitely worth doing.
No, it is. And I mean, we could have done that, we could have conceived a scheme where we did that at the beginning, but we didn't. We kept ourselves quite tight into the extension. In retrospect, would you prefer to have done it all, or was the part of the comfort of it is, okay, I know what I've got here, and actually that's going okay. And whilst and because that's we're now underway with that, it gives me the bandwidth, or gives me the opportunity to do something else.
It's an interesting question, because having said that, I always assume that everything that you spend ends up being double the amount you think it is. If the amount to start with would have been double the amount that we started with, I would have assumed that would have been double again.
Yes.
So I probably wouldn't have gone ahead with it, certainly not at this point, because that would have been a ridiculous amount of money. Now, as it turned out, the bits we do were in the kind of doubling bit, and this doesn't sound logical at all, and I work in finance, so it should be logical, but it's not. But in my head, that's what I would have thought. So if you start with a point of X, which is where we finished, I would have thought much more seriously about doing it, because really, when I committed to doing it, what I actually needed was another bedroom, another bathroom, a utility room, a better garage, a gym, an office, and all those things were fairly structural but incredibly important. The actual interior I knew needed doing something to it, but not quite as radically as we did. And if you'd have drawn a list of every single thing you'd ever want to do to the house, we'd never start, because it would cost way too much money. And I think it's fair to say also, it's easy in hindsight, but as most people are aware, the last 18 months or so, whether it's COVID related or not, or just a kind of catch up from the 15 years ago when the sort of housing market didn't perform very well, houses seem to have gone up. I mean, maybe the stamp duty holiday and things like that, but houses, certainly in Hereford, have gone up a lot in value, which they hadn't done for many years. So it was much easier knowing or seeing houses sell for quite, for higher values than you thought they were worth, and comparable houses selling for values that you didn't think this was worth, to be able to spend more money as you went along. Whereas at the start, bear in mind that was almost getting on for 2 years ago now, that didn't look likely, and may have been a more difficult conversation to have.
Interesting. No, it is interesting. Okay, so eventually, COVID aside and dust aside, furniture aside, we're sitting in a finished house. So has it been worth it? What's it like?
Yeah, no, it's definitely been worth it. I mean, it's incredible. It's kind of exactly what I'd kind of say, not planned at the outset. The bits I planned at the outset are good, but the other bits that we kind of invoked as we've gone through, it's all fantastic. It's all worked out very well. So it's a brilliant house to live in. When I moved in, before any of the work started, I've lived in a lot of houses here in London and various places, and when you live somewhere for a period of time, even just a matter of weeks, you get a feel for whether it's a good place to live. Not kind of calmer, but it was. I mean, I knew the house was built very well originally because it's very warm in the winter, very cool in the summer inside. So you know that the walls, the insulation was done properly, and yeah, it just kind of. But now it's a different. I mean, it's hard to remember what the house was like. I wasn't unhappy living in it before because people used to come around and say, "Wow, it's amazing." Mainly because the view at the back is still is stunning. But you know, I always thought it was a really good house. Now it's an incredible house, and it's kind of perfect, really. Yeah.
And I know that you're a very sociable person, and people have been round. And what's the kind of key thing that you like about the design, or like about the house itself? Now you've finished it.
I think it's for me, kind of, you know, like there were glass doors, windows at the back of the house. There's a lovely terrace and there's a great view, and there's a river. So it always was quite spectacular. But now it's just that it's the quality, really. I have to say the quality of the workmanship really has been. I know we talked a lot about the kind of windows which I thought initially were too industrial. They're not. They just now look very modern, but they looked very big and industrial when they were kind of initially put onto what was a slightly smaller, older looking house. Now that the house looks bigger and looks newer, they look fantastic. So yeah, it's that. I mean, this whole room here, which was obscured by some arches, the sort of dining room, 2 living areas, conservatory, which is a big, not quite L-shaped, T-shaped, I suppose now. Very functional room with kind of, you know, dining, TV, really, conservatory kind of, you know, sofas and things, the desk even. You know, this whole room is incredible. People just walk in and sort of say, wow. You've also got glass now all the way across the back of these 2 rooms. And from any part in this kind of T-shaped room, you can see most of the view, which you couldn't do before. So it's this really. I mean, everybody thinks the whole thing's great. The 2 roof terraces, obviously, as well, one above the conservatory and one above the gym on the 2 main bedrooms are quite impressive because the balconies that were there, or the balcony that was there on the main bedroom, was quite small, like not quite a Juliet balcony, but it would have been about 4 feet. These are probably something like, I don't know, 12 feet out. So when you get out to the corner, and literally from the one on the west side of the house, you can literally see 270 degrees, and you can see as far as, you know, River Wye and past that. So, you know, it's 30 mile views, 270 degrees around the house, which is quite incredible. It does get very hot at the back. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and it's very much south facing, so it literally gets the sun all day. So the terrace is a sun trap, but with all the glass, and actually we had sun protection glass in the end because it gets so much sun. It is great because any amount of good weather, literally all the doors come open, and this goes back to I have spent a bit of time in LA, and it is like a house up in Hollywood Hills where everything is glass at the back and everything opens out into the sun and the views. And that's kind of what I had in my mind, and it's kind of worked out really, really well, actually.
So talk to me a little bit about this idea of sort of inside and outside living, because that's part of sort of contemporary architecture.
Yeah.
There used to be, you know, a long distance between, you know, you used to live in dark houses, small windows, there's a big door.
Yeah.
You used to be either outside or inside.
Yeah.
Now with glass and sliding doors and this sort of technology, the difference between inside and outside and how you live between them, particularly in this space. And this house is almost an essay on modern living in light. So, you know, how do you use the terrace, and how does that work with the insides and outside?
I like fresh air, you know. I mean, the kids always laugh because I refuse to buy a car without a sunroof or a convertible top, and literally, unless it's pouring down a rain, it's open. And I just don't like to be kind of. I think I spent 30 odd years sat in an office and air conditioning and stuff. So, you know, if it's anything other than cold and raining, get up in the morning, open all of the doors. You know, both roof terraces for the bedrooms and all the doors down here. So the back of the house is, you know, to a great extent open. We eat, you know, if at all possible, outside, and this kind of outside dining table, lunch, dinner, breakfast, really, if it's warm enough, you know, and that's kind of because it's a bit of a sun trap, and it doesn't need to be that warm to be warm enough out there. There's not it gets windy because we're on a hill, but generally it captures any amount of warmth. So, you know, I'd rather live outside than inside. That's strange. I mean, the balcony doors on the roof terraces, the bedrooms, you can basically open them so not far enough for somebody to actually get through, lock them and take the keys out so nobody could put their hand in and unlock it. So I think for the last probably 2 months since we've had anything like kind of decent weather, that's been open at night, and it just doesn't feel like. I guess why people live in the country is because you get lots of fresh air, you can spend a lot of time outside. That's not always the case in town, but this kind of, we've managed to create that here. But then you can walk into town in 10 minutes, which is what I quite like. It's convenient. So it's really literally, if there is any amount of, even at night really, any amount of warmth outside, then all the doors can open, and it's kind of open house really.
Brilliant. And one of the things we found during COVID was there's a lot, obviously people were spending more time at their house. And one of the thoughts that I had was that house design is going to need to change. People will be not just living in the house, but working from home now becomes a far bigger proposition. And also like those sort of cave kind of spaces, so a gym, the garage was important to you, and that was a big part of what you did to the house. So part of this was providing a more adequate office for yourself. But the gym, and I noticed you got a drum kit in there. That sort of man cave kind of space. And the garage was a big deal for you as well because of cycling. So we don't often talk about spaces like that. What do you enjoy about those, or how?
Well, I guess it's it's a kind of a lifestyle house really, because I have bikes, skis, guitars, drums, stuff, just that you use, and also I guess the working from home thing for me, I've done that quite a bit over the years, from splitting time between London and Hereford, but also I'm getting towards the point where I don't really want to go to work anyway, so hopefully won't have to soon enough. So it's the things, I don't anticipate sitting in the conservatory reading books as much as I love doing that. I'm not going to be doing that all day every day, so I'm going to be out cycling.
No, it's really interesting, Russell. I think it's a fantastic project. It's an unusual project for Herefordshire. It's an unusual house, 1970s. Hereford is associated with this real rural kind of cottages and everything like that. So it's a 1970s house, very interesting site. As you say, we talk about in Communion views, light, space, and this house is, a textbook exercise on that, and it's become so much more than that as well. So it's a really interesting, and thanks for spending your time just chatting over. I know it's appreciated by a lot of people who are thinking of doing an architecture project. I guess just as a closing remark, any kind of top tips for anyone that's thinking of taking on a project?
No, I think just generally, you've got to kind of do it all. If you're going to do it, don't do half of it because you'll just regret it. So if you've got to have a good, don't do it unless you've got a very strong idea of what you want. And if you have that idea, then make sure that you do. We would have, not probably done all of it had I not been around so much, because you just don't see it. So you've got to really plan it and make sure that you do all the things that you really need to do. Don't compromise, because it's kind of not. You're going to spend the money and it's not going to be exactly what you want. This is now exactly what I want. It doesn't really matter what it's cost, because it's kind of perfect. So do it all. Don't do kind of half of it.
That's great. And I guess on the value stuff, has the money that you've invested in this, been worth it to you? And how do you value what you've got now?
Yeah, I mean, the very fortunate thing about this house is, as much as I said it was probably perfect when it was built in 1969, it wasn't a good enough house for the plot. It's one of only two with river moorings, proper boat moorings, and given the plot and the situation, it needed to be a better house for the plot. And as I say, very fortunately, which hasn't happened much in my property owning life, as I've spent money on it, the market seems to have gone up. So it does alleviate some of the pain of the cost. But yes, absolutely worth it. And it's just perfect.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for your time, Russell. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for Russell for allowing us to have this conversation. It's a real joy to sit in completed projects and review projects with our clients and celebrate the journey that we've all been on. A couple of standout points from my point of view from that conversation. I mean, one of the things we always say is that conversation is a great design tool. It is definitely part of our process, and to allow those conversations to continue after the projects have been completed is where we as architects learn. And hopefully, as part of this podcast series, we're looking to share our learnings with people who may be considering a project. One of the key points I found about the conversation that came out was this enjoyment of both inside and outside space. So this is one of the discourses that is a newer discourse in architecture. Historically, we had defensible buildings, so solid buildings, small windows, and there was a world of difference between inside space and the outside world. And outside you would have had the weather and the light, but no shelter. You'd also have views, but no comfort. And whilst inside, typically much darker, safe, to a degree warm, but not very. Very little understanding from when you're inside the house to the context and the world outside. Whereas the house that I'm sitting in at the moment, essentially the whole of the rear wall, or the whole of the south wall, is very, very heavily glazed. It has large sliding windows that we use quite a lot. Now, the advantage of this kind of architecture is manifold. Principally, the light that comes in is fantastic. The changing nature of daylight is one of those really unique things about this kind of new kind of space. The colours and the shadows in natural daylight are always shifting, from the early morning bluer light to the late afternoon and evening yellower light. You get to enjoy that. Obviously, there's the changing nature of the weather, from bright sunshine to overcast to being in a storm is very fantastic. Then there are the views, and being able to see, in this case for 30 miles, in lots of different directions. The one elevation of the room is a complete view, and the idea that the room does not stop at the end wall or the exterior of the wall. If we can dissolve that wall and turn it into a glass wall, then the room has that view as part of it. When you're in the space, you're enjoying the view, and also the size of the space is transformed. Instead of dealing with internal space, you're dealing with a room that has a depth of 30 miles, which is quite incredible. Another reason we really love the sliding doors is they don't really take up any kind of space within the plan, and they are also very, very light to use. You can, even a large panel of glass you can move very easily. And then there was also the idea that you can just crack open that door just to allow fresh air, and Russell's talking about his enjoyment of fresh air, which is again, as well as light, is a real luxury. So we really like using sliding doors. For the most part, we tend to use them over and above bifold doors. I guess the advantage of the bifold doors is when they're open, you do get almost 100% open area. Whereas sliding doors, you can get 50% or 66%, depending on how you arrange those things. But interestingly, in England, very, very rarely do we feel that we need a whole wall to disappear. It's much better to have the controllability of just a small amount of opening, and enjoying that space well. I also love, personally sitting in these kind of new spaces, enjoying the sunlight that comes in, enjoying the views, enjoying reading a quiet book in a puddle of sunlight is a real joy. Interesting as well, the understanding of value within a project. That's always a big conversation with our clients. There's obviously financial values, and then there are values associated to this is a place where we want to live and enjoy, and how there's a conversation about making sure that we can secure the vast majority of the financial expense, which then, as the conversation came out, gave our clients enough confidence to say, okay, well, actually that part of the project is secure. We are delivering it to those budgets. Whilst we are here, why don't we do this again? Because obviously, wouldn't it be wonderful if we got all of this thing done at one time? So that's quite a common issue in managing that process on site. Once again, wanted to say thank you for your time. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation. I certainly enjoyed being here with Russell, and a big thank you to him to allow us to have this and allow us to broadcast this. And we really wish everyone the greatest success as we look to work with you in order to transform your space and transform your lives. Thank you very much.